Welcome back to the Lux Glossary, where I break down spiritual terms you might hear all the time but don't fully understand through stories from my life. I am Dawn M. Rivers of DMR Coaching and Consulting, where I created the Lux Identity Spiral, the Spiral Sovereign, and the Path to the Awakened Woman. Today we're talking about alignment and manifestation. Let's dive in. Let me tell you about 2 trips that taught me everything about alignment. One flowed like a magical river, and the other one was a complete disaster. Spring 2021, quasi-pandemic. A friend told me about her brother and his girlfriend going to San Juan, Puerto Rico for their birthdays. And I was like, I've been wanting to go to Puerto Rico for a minute now, but hadn't pulled the trigger on going to this country by myself. I asked, can I join the trip? And she said, sure. And I was like, cool. So it was going to be her and a few other friends, as well as her brother and her sister. And I was like, I'm not going to stay with you. I'll rent a place and I'll join you for like dinner and maybe some activities. Cool, everything worked out. I found a place, I rented it. It's a quaint little house. At the back of this compound, it was a 1-bedroom house with a little kitchenette and a little bathroom, a place to sit outside with a little hammock. It was a few miles down the road from where they were staying in the hotels and a 5-minute walk to the beach. This husband and wife, they owned this little compound where their house was. Above their house was an apartment, and the back was my little house, my 1-bedroom house. I call it mine because I ended up staying there a few times. I loved it so much until their availability lessened and their prices increased, which I don't mind. I found them in the beginning of like this process of them starting to rent their home. It was walkable to shopping centers. I would go to the little local grocery store or supermarket to get some food for breakfast. I went shopping. I walked around town and felt so safe. Then I met up with them, hung out with her at the beach. Everything was perfect. I fell in love with Puerto Rico. Maybe a few months later, I had a yoga retreat in Southern Ohio. Loved this retreat, but I kept getting messages from a man who said, you need to have your retreat, your next retreat in Jamaica. And he was very persistent. So before I said yes or no, I did my research. I need you to send me some information so I know if this is true. I looked online, I searched by his name, the name of his company, and it seemed like it was legit. I said, I am going down to Puerto Rico again because I'm having this retreat. I need to just rest. And I also knew I was going to be looking at a retreat center in Puerto Rico while I was there. I'll come in November. I was telling my friend Leslie about me going to, I think it was Montego Bay, Jamaica, because this guy has a resort and he was inviting me to come look at the resort to have my next retreat there. She was like, girl, you can't go by yourself. And I was like, I'll be all right. She insisted. She lived in California. I lived in Cleveland. We flew down to Jamaica and thank God she came with me. So this is still 2021. We had to pay to stay. He gave us a discount, but he was like, oh no, y'all can't stay for free. And I was like, but you invited me. So we paid him, fine, whatever. And he booked our transportation, but we had to pay the driver. The driver picked us up from the airport, took us around a tour, and then took us to his resort, and we had to pay her. And I was like, I don't like how this feels. So it was okay. He showed us our room. It was a little room in the back of the retreat place. He didn't take us to a great room. He took us to like an okay room. It had a little flimsy lock on the door. We were feeling kind of uncomfortable. And I kept saying, Leslie, you were right. I'm so glad you came. His energy was very aggressive, very dominant. And I just didn't like it. Thank God Leslie stayed with me. We enjoyed ourselves. We did some things. So she was on her computer inside of this big palatial, almost like a plantation-sized house. And he and I sat outside and I would ask him questions about retreats and how these things would work. And it just didn't feel comfortable. I felt almost at risk. Like if she wasn't there, what would happen to me? He took us to his family farm, which was on the side of the mountain. It was beautiful, very beautiful. We had horses. The horses would roam free and they came up to us. We fed them. And I said, this is not really my vibe to have a yoga retreat out here with yoga on the grass. But he kept being persistent. And every time I said no, he didn't listen. Because it was still quasi-pandemic, we had to get our COVID test to fly back and to be allowed into the United States. And he kept saying, don't worry, don't worry. It's like the 12th hour. the night before we had to take our flight back. And I said, when are we going to get our COVID test? He finally gets a doctor to come over. The doctor does the test. Then we had to wait for our results to come back. The results didn't come back until early the next morning before we needed to go to the airport. I didn't like how any of this worked out. It was totally out of alignment. That trip was out of alignment, and I vowed I would never go back to Jamaica. Does it sound familiar? Something that looks good on paper, the invitation, the opportunity, the plan, but your body's like, no, something's off. That's misalignment. You're in a situation that once felt right, but now it doesn't. Checking all the boxes, good job, nice life, doing what you should, but something feels wrong. Alignment is when your outer life matches your inner truth. It's clarity in motion. When your energy, choices, boundaries, and goals reflect who you really, truly are, not who you were taught to be, that's alignment. In the spiral, alignment isn't a one-time destination. It's both compass and checkpoint. You return to it again and again, each time more refined and rooted. Signs you're in alignment. Decisions feel clear, not forced. Like Puerto Rico, everything was just working out for me. Your energy flows instead of drains. Opportunities show up naturally. You feel like you again. Signs you're out of alignment. Your body screaming warning signs, warning, danger, danger. Like my discomfort in Jamaica. Chronic exhaustion even after rest. Resentment building in relationships or work. Saying yes when you mean no. You're performing your life. Now when I travel, when I make decisions, when I choose who to work with, I check for alignment first. Powerful. Once you're in alignment, you become a magnet for what you truly desire. That's where manifestation comes in, but not the way you were always taught. In 2019, I created a list, a very intentional list of 10 wellness, meditation, and yoga teachers of color, specifically Black teachers. They weren't just any teachers. They were a star list of global teachers. The first one I met was Faith Hunter, my guru. I ended up doing my advanced yoga teacher training with her. I had decided that I wanted her to be my mentor. I would go to her Instagram and I would comment, like, share, so she knew who I was. When she came to Columbus, Ohio, I attended a workshop there. I drove 2.5 hours and I said, hi, I have something to give to you. And it was a tank top that said Daybreak Yoga. And she said, oh, you're Daybreak Yoga. She was the beginning. The search was on and the list grew over 2 years. But I didn't want this new decade to start before I was able to check off each person from this list. I was very intentional and purposeful with my list and how I would meet them. This wasn't just wishing, this was aligned action. I took their workshops and their courses. And like when I went to see Faith Hunter, I did the same thing. If anybody had an in-person training or retreat, I signed up for that. I met several of them at Wanderlust. We called it Wakandalusst this one year down in Atlanta, Georgia. I was on a roll. I was so excited. I was engaging, I was connecting, and I was making a community that made me feel supported and safe. There was one last person on my list who came to my awareness through another yoga teacher's podcast. And I really liked what he was saying. His audience was growing on Instagram. He had some offers. I attended some virtual events with him. I did a course with him. He had online coaching. Well, it was actually a phone call coaching. I did that for 6 weeks. I was in his sphere. I knew I had to meet him. He was on my list. It was December 2019. And I reached out to Justin because my mom, my daughter, and I were flying out to Los Angeles where my son lived. And I knew that Justin lived out in Hollywood. I said, Justin, I'm coming December 2019 to see my son. If you're there, I would love to meet you in person. The year was coming to a close. The decade was coming to an end. And I didn't want to start 2020 without finishing this list. I had manifested 9 people I had met in person, and I needed to meet Justin Michael Williams in person too. Guess what he said? Oh, darn, I'm not going to be in LA. I'm going to be in Chicago that weekend. I said, it's okay. I believe it's going to work out. Enjoyed my time with my children and my mom. And we had like 1 day left before we had to fly out. Justin sends me a text and says, I will be in LA. I have about an hour before I need to do whatever he had to do. I booked my Uber. It took an hour to get there. We met in a park near his house. We talked for an hour. It was amazing, wonderful, and magnificent. He took me to his favorite crystal shop. I bought one of my favorite crystals there. It all worked out. Everything was working out for me. I couldn't believe it. I had manifested the last person on my list in December 2019, right before the end of the year. Have you ever tried to manifest something and it didn't work out? Or it came, but it didn't feel the way you thought it would? Maybe you made a vision board and nothing happened. Or you got what you wanted, but it wasn't fulfilling. That's because manifesting is not about vision boards or wishful thinking. Your body knows the difference between wanting something and being ready for it. And manifesting without aligned action is just daydreaming. It's energy plus embodiment plus action. It's co-creation with the divine. Here's a real process. You heard it in my story. 1. Get clear. Know exactly what you want and why. 2. Align your energy. Become the kind of person who can hold what you desire. 3. Follow the nudges. When opportunity appears, follow the breadcrumbs. 4. Take aligned action. Don't just hope. Show up. Engage. Reach out. 5. Receive. Trust divine timing. Don't force it, then say yes when it appears. The key most people miss? True manifestation is becoming the kind of woman that can hold what she desires. I couldn't have had meaningful conversations with these teachers if I hadn't done my own work first. I had to become the version of me who belonged in these spaces. If you manifest money, but your inner identity says I'm broke, you'll lose it. If you call in a relationship but don't believe you're worthy, you'll sabotage it. That's why alignment comes first. You can't manifest authentically from a misaligned place. Like manifesting peace while ignoring every red flag, your body is screaming at you. Now I set intentions. I don't just visualize. I ask, what version of me can hold this? What do I need to embody? What aligned actions do I need to take? And then I trust divine timing, like I did when Justin was in Chicago. I didn't force it. I believed it. Question for you. What are you trying to manifest that you're not energetically ready to hold? Alignment equals your outer life matching your inner truth. Puerto Rico versus Jamaica. Manifestation equals creating from intention through aligned action and energy. My list of 10 teachers, they work together. You can't manifest authentically through misalignment. And alignment without manifestation is just preparation without action. In the next video, we're talking about karma and the law of attraction. Because once you understand alignment and manifestation, you need to know how energy actually works. What you put out comes back to you, but not in the way you've been taught. Want to dive deeper into alignment and manifestation? You need to join our free school community, Awaken and Limitless, where we explore these concepts together and support one another on our journey. The link is in the description. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel for the next term and drop a comment below. What's one thing you're ready to manifest from alignment? Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.